If you inherit money, there's a weird moment that hits a lot of people. You're grieving, and at the exact same time, you're suddenly responsible for a bunch of financial decisions that can't be undone. And the scary part is, most of these inheritance mistakes don't happen because someone is reckless. They happen because someone is rushed, and it's at one of the worst times in their life. They get one wrong piece of advice, or they try to clean everything up too quickly, and that's how they accidentally trigger taxes, family conflict, or just long-term regret. So in this video, I'm going to walk through inheritance in a really practical way from both sides. So first, if you're inheriting, what to do in the first couple of days and weeks, what paperwork actually matters, and how to avoid the big financial mistakes. And if you're planning to leave money behind, what you can do now to make it dramatically easier for your family, and why communication often matters more than money. By the end of this video, you'll have a simple framework that you can use whether you're dealing with this tomorrow or hopefully 20 years from now. If we haven't met, I'm Andy, the founder of VDB Wealth. I work with high net worth individuals, entrepreneurs, tech workers, and business owners. And inheritance is one of those topics that comes up constantly, either because someone is receiving money or because they're thinking, I want to do this the right way for my kids and help limit the tax impact. So here's what we're going to cover in today's video. First, the logistics. What actually happens when someone dies and what needs to get done. Second, the tax and estate side of things. What's taxable, what isn't, and what are the typical gotchas that people deal with. Third, how do we think about inheritance in your financial plan without counting on it too early? And fourth, why communication to education, or really the whole game, especially for the next generation. So let's start with the part that nobody prepares you for, the logistics. So the logistics when someone dies. My first principle, don't rush big financial decisions right after someone dies. There's a reason most people say no big decisions when you're grieving. But in inheritance, people do it all the time because there's pressure. Bills still need to be paid, people are asking questions, accounts are frozen, maybe a house needs attention, and ultimately all family members want to be efficient and move on from this terrible time in their life. The mindset I'd advise to follow is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Your job in the beginning is not to optimize the portfolio, your job is to get organized. Here's the first week checklist I want people to think about. First, get multiple certified copies of the death certificate. You want to locate the will and any of the trust documents. You want to identify the executor or the trustee. And you want to make a list of the person's key assets and accounts. So be careful with bills. Pay what's necessary, but don't start moving assets around without any guidance at this point. Let me unpack a few of those things. First, death certificates. Almost every institution, banks, brokerage firms, life insurance companies, they're going to require a certified death certificate before they do anything. It's worth getting more than you think now so you can save time in the future. There's a big point of confusion in the first couple of weeks, the will versus the trust. A will doesn't control everything. Some assets transfer by beneficiary designation or by how they're titled, like retirement accounts, life insurance, transfer on death, jointly owned accounts, assets inside a trust. So one of the first things we do is map out what passes through the will and probate and what passes outside probate, because that impacts timing, complexity, privacy, and sometimes family friction. One of the most stressful parts is simply who has legal authority to do what. The executor has authority for assets governed by the will and probate. The trustee has authority for assets owned by the trust. Beneficiaries have authority over assets that transfer directly to them once the institution processes it. And this is why families get stuck. Someone is trying to do the right thing, but the institution won't talk to them because they don't have legal authority yet. So again, the goal very early on is get clarity and organization. Next is to create a practical inventory. So a simple way to create an inventory without getting overwhelmed is by creating 5 buckets. The first is cash and bank accounts. The second is brokerage and investment accounts. The third is retirement accounts, so 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRAs. The fourth is real estate, and the fifth is business interests or private investments. And for each bucket, you want to know where is it held, how is it titled, who are the beneficiaries, is there any debt tied to it, and who is managing it right now. This inventory becomes the master document that makes everything else easier. Now let's talk about taxes, because this is where people accidentally step on landmines. Here's the headline. Inheriting money is often less taxable than people fear, but it depends heavily on what type of asset you're inheriting. So I'll go asset by asset here and highlight the key rules and some of the biggest mistakes that pop up. There's 2 big categories. Estate tax. So that is a tax on the value of someone's estate when they die. It's typically only relevant for very large estates, and it's dependent on current law. Right now, there's a $15 million estate tax exemption per person. So if you have an estate under that, you do not pay estate tax. But if any dollar above 15 million, you do pay estate tax on. Income tax. These are taxes you pay when you receive income or take distributions, like pulling money from an inherited retirement account. So most people accidentally focus on the wrong one. For many families, the bigger day-to-day issue is income tax rules around retirement accounts and what happens to cost basis in investments and real estate. So I'll break it down a little bit for you. If you inherit cash, money in a checking account, savings account, or just cash distribution from the estate, that inheritance itself is typically not taxable. But 2 other things matter. Any interest earned after you you inherit is going to be taxable going forward. And if there's an estate or trust, there might be timing and reporting considerations depending on how distributions are made. If you inherit a taxable brokerage account that includes stocks, ETFs, mutual funds, this is where a huge benefit often shows up. In many cases, the cost basis is reset to the value around the date of death. People call this a step up in basis. So if your parents bought a stock at $10 and it's worth $100 today and you inherit, your taxable gain might effectively start around $100 and not $10. So if you sell shortly after inheriting, you may owe little or no capital gains tax depending on price movement. The common mistake is selling something and paying taxes you didn't need to because the cost basis wasn't updated properly or because the account got mishandled in transfer. So the practical rule here is before you sell inherited investments, confirm the cost basis is correct. Real estate often follows a similar concept. The value can reset around the date of death, which can reduce capital gains if the property is sold. But the challenging thing about real estate is it adds emotion and complexity. Siblings often disagree whether to keep it or sell it. Someone wants to live in the house, someone wants to rent it out, someone wants to do what mom or dad would have wanted, and the property still has insurance, taxes, maintenance, and maybe even a mortgage. Here's the practical approach I like. Ensure the property is insured and secured, get a basic valuation or appraisal if needed, and then decide as a family, are we keeping it, are we selling it, or are we renting it? The biggest issue comes when one person slightly takes control without alignment. Now let's talk about the big one, retirement accounts. If you inherit a 401k, IRA, or Roth IRA, the rules are totally different than inheriting a brokerage account. In most cases, money coming out of a traditional retirement account is taxable income. And with inherited accounts, there are strict rules about timing and distributions, especially for non-spouse beneficiaries. So the number one inheritance tax mistake I see is someone inherits a retirement account and either takes too much too fast and triggers a huge tax bill, or they miss the required distribution rules, which creates penalties or problems. So here are some of the high-level concepts. Rules depend on whether you're a spouse or a non-spouse beneficiary. Traditional accounts are generally taxable when distributed, while Roth inherited accounts can be tax-free but still have distribution rules. Many non-spouse beneficiaries fall under rules that require the account to be emptied within a certain window. This is the part where you want a coordinated plan with your CPA and your wealth advisor because distribution timing can be the difference between paying taxes at a moderate rate spread over years or stacking income into 1 year and paying at a much higher rate. Life insurance is often straightforward. Death benefit proceeds are typically received income tax-free by beneficiaries. But there are exceptions and planning nuances depending on ownership, estate inclusions, and how policies are structured, especially for very large policies. If you're the person leaving money behind, this is where proper structuring matters a lot. If you inherit a business interest or operating business, private equity, venture funds, private real estate deals, you should expect 3 things: paperwork, valuation complexity, and timing delays. There might be restrictions on transfers, capital calls, K1s, and delayed tax forms. This is one of those areas where just distributed equally is not always practical because one asset is liquid and another is not. So if you're planning your estate and have private investments, it's worth doing real planning, not just hoping it'll be easy. Here's the simplest way to remember inheritance tax rules. Cash, inheritance itself is usually not taxable. Future interest is taxable. Brokerage accounts, watch cost basis and potential step up. Real estate, similar cost basis reset concepts, but decisions matter a lot. Retirement accounts, distributions are generally taxable with time constraints. Roth accounts are often tax-free but still have those time constraints. Life insurance, often income tax-free, but there's a lot of planning nuance. Business and private equity funds, complex, slow, paperwork heavy. The bigger rule is just don't take action until you know what type of asset you're dealing with. Now let's talk about the emotional and planning side, because this is where high earners and successful people get tripped up in a totally different way. If you might inherit money someday, the question is, how should that impact your financial plan today? Here's my view. Most people should treat an expected inheritance like a possible bonus, not a guaranteed paycheck, unless the inheritances are already structured and irrevocable. So here's my 2-plan approach I typically take. Plan A, this is based off of your financial life without an inheritance. Plan B, if an inheritance happens, it accelerates your goals and adds flexibility. So instead of mentally spending future money, you should use it thoughtfully. It could increase your margin of safety, it can reduce your risk in retirement, it could fund a big life goal like a vacation home or a big family trip, it allows more generosity through charitable giving, or it just changes the estate planning for your own kids. But by no means should you build your whole life around it. Here are some of the non-tax mistakes inheritors often make. Lifestyle inflation happening too fast, not because they're irresponsible, but because it feels like permission to upgrade everything in their life at once. Paying off low interest debt instantly. Sometimes that emotionally great feeling is actually financially suboptimal. It depends on your goals and your interest rates. Concentrating risk. For example, inheriting a big single stock position and just holding it because mom believed in it, even if it creates a risky imbalance. And finally, just avoiding decisions. I've seen too many people just leave money sitting in cash because it all feels overwhelming, and that decision has a cost too. So the goal isn't perfection. The goal is pause, plan, and then act. Here's a framework that works really well. There are 3 buckets you can do when you inherit money. The first is stability. Shore up your foundation. 2, fund your goals that matter on your own timeline. And 3, growth. Invest for long-term compounding. Stability may be adding to your emergency reserves, paying off high-interest debt, making sure insurance and estate tax are dialed. Your additional goals may be a vacation home, kids' education, a sabbatical, starting a business, charitable giving. Whereas growth is focused on investing based on your new risk tolerance, time horizon, and diversifying in a tax-aware manner. The mistake I see too often is skipping straight to growth without re-examining their own financial plan. Now let's flip it to the other side. If you're someone who plans to leave money behind to your children or other heirs, and this is the part that most people avoid. They do the legal documents, they set up the accounts, they name beneficiaries, they build the trusts, but they never actually communicate it with their family. And then when they're gone, their kids are left trying to interpret, what did our parents want? How is the money actually structured? Who do I call? Why did you make these certain decisions? And so I view inheritance as a process and not an event. It's not just about money transfers after death. It's about instilling the values, responsibilities, education, expectation for your family, depending on your own family dynamics and goals. And the more money that is involved, the more important it is to communicate intentionally prior to an inheritance event. Now, everyone thinks that means you have to share exact numbers. That's not necessarily the case, but I do think most families should share structure and expectations. Importantly, where are the key documents? Who is the executor or trustee? Who do you call? Who's the CPA? Who's the attorney? Who's the advisor? And here's the general purpose of the plan. Even a single meeting with adult kids to explain the framework can prevent a couple of years of confusion. And this should happen far before you're in bad health. And one of the highest ROI things that I've shared on this YouTube channel many a times is just creating a simple folder that includes all the relevant information. The Key to Life folder. This should include your estate documents, a list of all your accounts, key passwords, access instructions, and some instructions for your family. Where they can find things and who they need to reach out to. It doesn't need to be fancy, it just needs to exist. And finally, financial education. If you want your kids to be good stewards of wealth, you can't outsource that to a future inheritance. You need to teach them early on how cash flow works, how investing works, and how taxes work at a high level. Because the truth is, money doesn't change people, it just amplifies who they already are. And education plus communication gives your family the best shot at an inheritance being a blessing and not a burden. So to recap, inheritance is emotional, logistical, and financial. So you want to be sure to slow down, get organized, and coordinate thoughtfully, because every different account is going to have a different way of being handled. And if you're leaving money behind, simplify the logistics for your family, document it, communicate early, so you can make sure your kids just aren't guessing. If this is something you're navigating, either you've received an inheritance or you're planning on how you want to pass wealth down, you want a second set of eyes on the structure, taxes, and your overall plan, it's exactly what we do at VDP Wealth. You can reach out through the link in my description or just send me a message with a little context and we'll figure out the right next step. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.